So UFC 302 is just right around the corner. It will happen this Saturday. And this morning, I was just having my morning coffee, doing a little research about the UFC stats and stuff. But I realized there's something that I totally forgot about that will dramatically change the outcome of this fight. Before, in my last video, I put Dustin Poirier to lose in round 3, whether it's by a submission or a KO, but either way, I was predicting that Dustin Poirier is gonna get finished. But now looking at this big update that I just saw, I'm surprised at myself that how did I not even notice this before I picked the fight. But I no longer think that's gonna be the case. I don't think Islam's gonna finish Dustin Poirier in the 3rd round, and here's why. So throughout Islam's entire fight camp against Dustin Poirier, he doesn't really seem like he has that seriousness where he was facing against Oliveira or he was facing against Volk. We've seen in multiple images that Islam's always just laughing, he's just making jokes. It almost feels like he just doesn't really think Dustin Poirier is a worthy opponent, and he is extremely overconfident. And that could be an issue going into a fight game where he thinks that this opponent isn't as good. We've seen it from Izzy and Sean Strickland, where Izzy just knew he was going to knock Strickland out. And look what happened to that. And we even see how Islam is making those sarcastic jokes. Oh, he's totally going to guillotine me. His guillotine's very, very good. I have to be very careful. So people might wonder, oh, so are you just going to pick Dustin because Islam is too cocky? No, I am not picking Dustin because Islam is overconfident. So UFC have just released their fighters picture for UFC 302 today, and we can see that it seems like Islam Makhachev is dealing with a staph infection on his leg while in today's picture, and we can even see how McGregor is not pleased with that and calling him a cheater. And one thing we know about staph infection is that it dramatically decreases a fighter's gas tank. If you want to look at for an example, just look at Dustin's last fight. He was fighting against the upcoming prospect, BSD. Throughout the first round of Dustin versus BSD, BSD was just pressuring Dustin against the cage, throwing hard elbows, just completely manhandling him, and it was a very decisive first round win. Everyone knows that BSD won the first round against Dustin, and it wasn't even close. However, when it comes to the second round, that's where you see the staph infection start playing in. It just seems like that BSD just looked like a complete different person compared to his first round and his second round. It just seems like that he didn't really know what to do when he's tired. He's just throwing very random haymakers, leaving himself open. And a lot of the times when fighters leave themselves open is because they're tired and they don't have the energy to keep their hands up like that and defend themselves from upcoming strikes, which led to Dustin eventually knocking BSD out rather early in the second round, really quick. Now with my new prediction, rather than Islam finish Dustin in the 3rd round like how I predicted earlier, my new prediction is that Dustin Poirier in the 1st round is going to get knocked out or submitted by Islam Makhachev. They're not even going to go to the 3rd round. This is just going to be a 1-round fight, and Islam is just going to finish him in the 1st round. And I know you guys are wondering, why am I doing this? Why am I saying that Islam is going to finish him in the 1st round? Doesn't Dustin have a cardio advantage since Islam has a staph infection? And the reason of that is because Islam is not BSD. He definitely has dealt with these type of staph infection before, and he knows he's not going to go on the later round, so he's going to give it all he has, and he's going to straight up take Dustin down. He's probably going to submit him, or he's going to do a ground and pound. It doesn't matter. We know how weak Dustin is when it comes to deal with these ground and pounds, comes to deal with being taken down. It's almost like if you have a really elite wrestler that's just going to take him down, he's just going to accept the ground. Even though he doesn't want to. It's different from Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira wants to be on the ground, but Dustin Poirier doesn't, but he's still gonna get on the ground. We've seen if Michael Chandler could just take him down or do those WWE slam on him with ease. What do you think Islam is gonna do to him in the 1st round? And Islam's gonna find that neck way easier than Michael Chandler will, and he's definitely studied the previous tapes of Charles Oliveira. Know when Dustin's gonna open his neck, and he's just gonna get him in the 1st round. And also, here's another thing that I heard from the YouTuber MMA Guru, where he stated out a very important factor of why he just doesn't seem like Dustin is gonna win this fight. And here's the video.
Poirier's had a fucking hip replacement, guys. He's not beating Islam Makhachev.
So I'm not too sure on the sources where MMA Guru said that Dustin's having a hip replacement, because I couldn't find it anywhere else on the internet. But at the same time, it is kind of reasonable for them to not announce this before probably his most important fight. Like, why would you announce that you just had a possibly career-changing surgery right before the most important fight of your career? So that's gonna be my prediction for the main event of UFC 302. Islam by first round knockout or submission. But I do hope both fighters will come pretty healthy, because we do want to see a good fight and we do know how good of a fight this could be. But it just seems like both these fighters aren't really healthy coming up to this fight right now. And it do seem like Dustin Poirier has a more serious case than Islam Makhachev. So there's some new announcement in today's UFC update, including Dana White announcing who is going to be on the UFC Saudi Arabia card. It will be Corey Sandhagen going against Umar Nurmagomedov. Sorry, I can't really pronounce that name. Or I can, but I just said it wrong right there. But, so the main event is going to be Corey Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. I said it right that time. And then the co-main event is going to be Vicente Luque against Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz will finally make his return to the UFC after a long hiatus. I honestly think he was going to retire. And then the next fight we got is Marlon Vera versus Davison Figueiredo. Mackenzie Dern is on the card too. And wrap it up with the main card, we have Tony Ferguson going against Michael Chiesa. God, I hope this will be Tony's last fight. I really just want to see him sail off into the sunset, and I think nobody really wants to see Tony take that much damage anymore, especially how old he is now. I've been watching Tony Ferguson ever since I started watching MMA. I love Tony Ferguson. I think this guy has one of the most underrated careers in history of MMA or UFC. And I just really hope that he could retire in front of a full crowd. And this is in Saudi Arabia too. Maybe Khabib's gonna be there, and hopefully Khabib can give him the farewell tour that Tony Ferguson deserves. Can you imagine that? These two are supposed to fight each other 7 times throughout their career, but it never happened. And we always talk about Tony Ferguson as the nemesis of Khabib that never faced him. So how great of a story would it be when Tony Ferguson retires and his long rival Khabib is there congratulating him for such a Hall of Fame career, and in the end they hug it off and ride into the sunset? How good of a story would that be? Now I'm gonna break it down the main event of that card, and I'll probably do a specific video on this card just because it's such a big card. I do think this card is even better than UFC 301. I think Corey has a very good chance of beating Umar right here. We know that Umar is the next coming Khabib in the bantamweight division, but the thing is, Umar almost got knocked out very early on in his last fight, and I do think those are the shots that Corey can find in their fight. And I do think Corey has been improved on his wrestling and his takedown defense, especially now when Corey's training with one of the most decorated striking coach of all time, Trevor Whitman. We know who Trevor Whitman is. He's trained Justin Gaethje, he's trained Kamaru Usman, and those two have some terrifying strikings and knockouts. And one thing we know about Corey is that his striking level before he met Trevor Whitman was already better than Kamaru Usman. I'm not too sure about Justin Gaethje. I think his level was better than Justin Gaethje, but Justin Gaethje just throws heavier hands. I'm gonna have to go with Corey on this one. I know Corey is probably gonna be a massive underdog going into this fight, but I just don't think Umar has faced anyone like Corey before, and I just don't really think Umar has really pinpointed Corey's striking, or he understands Corey's striking as much as he faced the previous fighters. Overall, I think UFC 302 is going to be an amazing card. Even the prelim have some very good fights. I have people in the comment on my last video ask me who I got on the Kopylov fight, and I do think this is one of the most underrated prelim fights of this year. And I was pretty disappointed that I didn't look into this fight. I should have made a description in the last video, but now I'm going to break it down in this video. Thank you so much for leaving those comments. The whole point of me doing these MMA videos is just for you guys to see at the end of the day. And whatever fights you guys want me to break down, of course, I'll try to break it down. At the end of the day, these videos are just a better understanding for you guys. So for those that don't know, Cesar Almeida is supposed to be the next Pereira in the middleweight, where he is a phenomenal Brazilian kickboxer that has very few MMA experience. He's only been fighting in the UFC twice, actually once, considering his first fight was the Dana White Contender Series. But he's been 5-0 in the UFC, and he has a very, very good kickboxing skill. Whereas Roman Kopylov, he's also a really good striker, throws one of the best body kick of all time, but a lot of people are saying that he is the next champ, probably the greatest striker in the current middleweight division, and you have YouTubers like Lucas Tracy even saying that he's going to be Izzy if they ever fight. And as a prediction, this will be a very coin flip fight because we just haven't seen enough from Almeida yet in the UFC, and also we've seen the low point of Roman Kopylov, and I just have to favor Cesar Almeida in this fight. The reason of that is just because Cesar Almeida has faced tougher opponent than Roman Kopylov, and I don't think Roman Kopylov have faced a tougher opponent than Cesar Almeida. I do think this is the toughest opponent that Roman Kopylov have faced so far. The factor of this is that Cesar Almeida is a pure striker. He's not a good striker. He is a pure striker. He's a striker specialist. And Roman Kopylov's biggest weapon is his kicks. We've seen this type of fights just a couple months ago against, I think, Jose Aldo and Jonathan Martinez, where Jonathan Martinez is one of the best leg kickers in the bantamweight division, and Jose Aldo has a lot of experience in checking leg kicks because he's such a leg kick specialist himself. And I just think Almeida just knows how to neutralize Roman Kopylov's deadliest weapon, and Almeida also just have more experience in striking. But however, I don't think this is gonna be a lock. I do think Roman Kopylov can throw a really hard kick and catch Cesar Almeida off guard, but the chances of that is very, very low. But if he does do that, Roman Kopylov stock will go up immediately and dramatically. Almeida is one of those fighters that has gone toe-to-toe with one of the best kickboxers in the world, Alex Pereira, for 3 fights, and all 3 fights were extremely close. You can even argue the fights that he won was more convincing than the 2 losses he had against Pereira. The 2 losses were actually very close, but the fight that he beat Pereira was actually more convincing. If Kopylov is managed able to beat Almeida, we might see him going against a better opponent in his next fight, and perhaps we might see him going against Israel Adesanya. We know how UFC love matching up with striker and striker, and they do favor these type of matchup because of the amount of hype it can bring to people. But I'm still have to go with Cesar Almeida with this one, and if Cesar Almeida managed to beat Roman Kopylov, I want to see him against a top 5 fighter. I feel like middleweight should be moving on now. I just think that this division has been holding on way too long, and there's way too many upcoming prospects. So possibly see him against the winner of Jared Cannonier versus who's that guy again? Nasruddin Imavov. Yeah, Nasruddin Imavov. We just gotta keep making these strikers fight strikers. Honestly, this is the only reason and the only way for UFC to revive their middleweight drought. Honestly, it was pretty exciting when Pereira won, but now Pereira's not there anymore, and we have Drakus and Izzy, and most likely Izzy's just gonna beat Drakus again and become the champ. So we probably have to see some striker versus striker just to revive the division a little bit. And that's gonna be the end of today's breakdown. Thank you guys so much for watching. I honestly didn't expect that to get that many views in the first video, although it's really not that much, but I honestly thought I was gonna get like no views. And thank you so much for the comments and feedbacks. If you guys want to watch more fight breakdowns, please let me know in the comments, and have a good day.